Hi there, it's Uncle Ron, and tonight I'm gonna pose a question to you in an edition of Uncle Ron's Thoughts. I'm in the just finishing up the first round of the 2001 playoffs, and playoff baseball is such a different animal than regular season baseball. I think of the big four that is the one sport where everything just kind of coaches different, especially when you get to pitching and how you deal with that. Now, I released this game earlier today, the 7th of September, but if you watched it live on Twitch, you watched the Seattle Mariners beat the New York Yankees in 5 games. And what came out after the game, talking to Invisible fan and good friend Ricky Keeler, was that the computer, and again, I'm not going to blame any AI here, it's just kind of an interesting thing. In the 9th inning of the decisive game of that series, the computer did not go to Mariano Rivera in the 9th in a 2-2 tie. It stuck with Jay Whittisick, who, when I looked through the stats, actually had a very good series. He just made one bad pitch, and it was the walk-off homer by David Bell. And so Ricky asked, should I have put in Mariano Rivera? And there are times that I personally will intervene on behalf of the AI and make that decision. Whittisick was pitching fine. He didn't have a base runner on, and as it turned out, when I went and watched the game footage, the chance of a home run from David Bell was a whopping 2.3%. So it wasn't like Whittisick was overmatched. But the thought does kind of go out there, and what do you do if you're a gamer is, if you're playing a season after 1983 or whatever, what do you do in that situation? Now, I think the book says for the visiting team, at least through 9 innings, is you don't use your closer in regulation, just because you are the visiting team, and so you have the chance, if you get the lead in the 10th inning, let's say, to go ahead and put in that ace relief pitcher. And trust me, you don't get any better than Mariano Rivera. You could use him in the 10th and the 11th if you would so choose. That's how I probably would have done it if that home run hadn't been hit, unless Seattle started to threaten. And then you kind of have to slam the door. You cannot give up a run at that point. But I think the general rule of thumb, at least in my head, is you go with who you got for the first 9, and then if you are the closer of a team, you at least take the chance of maybe getting the lead in the 10th or the 11th, and then you're in there to keep the door slammed shut. Trying to get an AI to understand that is a completely different story, because the AI is told to do something, and you certainly cannot. I've never seen any game, and again, not slamming action PC baseball at all, but there really is no difference in the AI between a regular season game and a playoff game or a game late in the year. You manage differently in June than you do the last week of September or in a critical game in October. I just don't know how you would do that, have 2 or 3 different sets of AI, which is why I tend to actually interfere or go against the book if I'm managing the home team. What I didn't realize when I had that conversation with Ricky yesterday was that I had pretty much committed the same cardinal sin as what the AI had. Sasaki is the closer for Seattle. I controlled Seattle for 2 of those 3 games that we actually streamed. I had the Yankees in game 4. I never used him either. Now, Freddie Garcia threw a 2 or 3 hitter in game 1, a complete game, and he was cruising right along with a 5-run lead. I wasn't going to waste my closer for that. But in the 9th inning of game 5, I went with Arthur Rhodes in the 8th inning and kept him in there for the 9th. He actually pitched 2 shutout 6 up, 6 down innings. And so I just stuck with my hot hand. Now, when would have I used Sasaki? I had known in the back of my mind that if Rhodes had put on a base runner, that was going to have to be the case. He was the Mariners' closer that year, Sasaki. And again, you have to keep that door slammed shut. A 1 run can make all the difference, especially knowing that you're going against Mariano Rivera. In fact, a couple times during the game, I said Seattle really needs to have this tied by the 7th inning, because if the Yankees are ahead, I was going to put Rivera in for 6 outs. I mean, that is a legitimate play. If you're ahead and you're the visiting team, you go with the best relief pitcher in baseball history. But again, I mean, there are things that, as human managers, you struggle with. Again, the book play for me would have been use Sasaki in the 9th. He was never going to pitch with a lead in that game. Once Seattle didn't take the lead in the bottom of the 8th, the closer role really kind of goes out the window. He becomes the stopper. And Arthur Rhodes did the job and ended up getting the win. In fact, I think Arthur Rhodes won 2 games in that series. So, but again, the book says you go with the closer in that situation, so even as the human manager, I didn't necessarily get the right call. But what do you guys do on the tabletop? Forget anything from the era of the Rolaids firemen, because we know going up to probably 84 that there were certain pitchers, Danquist and Barry Goose Gossage, you name John Hiller, you name them, that you're going to bring in maybe even as early as the 7th with 2 out, and they're going to pitch the 8th and the 9th. That's what they were designed for, to get you 6 outs, to get you 9 outs in a tie game, or maybe even down a run. So that managerial decision is a bit easier. And I think for computer AI, although this really isn't just an AI question, they're going to look to see how many innings pitched and how many appearances, and they know what they're going to be able to get. But in the modern closer era, so let's say anything from 86 forward, how do you handle that in either a late season game or an elimination game? And no one has it right. I mean, you can go with the example of Buck Showalter not using Zach Britton the year that Toronto beat Baltimore in the wild card game for the American League. You've got to use him at some point. You just can't wait, if you're the visiting team, which Baltimore was that year, to wait till you had the lead, because you may never have the lead, which is what happened in that game. So you had the best relief pitcher in baseball that particular year sitting on the bench as your team loses. Again, I think my decision would have been if the Yankee-Seattle game had gone into the 10th, regardless of whether the Yankees had the lead or not, to start the 10th inning with Rivera. I know he can get you 6 outs, and in fact, if you're lucky, maybe the Yankees score in the 11th inning to give Rivera a game to close, although he wouldn't get credit for the save, he'd get credit for the win. But again, I think everyone will play that differently. Yes, I think you go for the 6 outs for there, but for you on the table, when do you bring that person in? Flashback to the night before, the Game 4 between Houston and Florida in their National League Divisional Series, and it's a 5-run lead for Houston going in the bottom of the 9th, and the computer picks Ron Vallone to pitch for Houston, and something told me that I probably should have overrode that. In fact, I did once. Vallone's numbers weren't very good, but Houston had a 5-run lead at that point. Geez, can't you get me 3 outs with a 5-run lead, or can't you get the computer 3 outs with a 5-run lead? And the answer to that was no. Vallone did a couple bad batters, and the computer recognized that it should have Billy Wagner in, although it wasn't a save situation. I think the game was 7-2 at that point. Well, 3 runs later, we are in a save situation, and Billy Wagner's getting knocked around. And so the argument the other way is, would you burn your closer with a 5-run lead? It almost didn't work, except for that it did. Houston won the ball game 7-5, and they won the series 3-2. So the question remains is, is it possible for computer games such as Action PC or Out of the Park or even Stratomatic to have maybe a different type of AI to handle pitchers in perceived super pressure games, such as when your season is on the line in the regular season? Again, you might let a starting pitcher, pitch out of trouble in June if you're 4 games up or 4 games behind because it's just one game. But when you are playing for a playoff spot, you know that you have to be quick with the hook. So a pitcher that might give up 5 runs in a game in May or even August isn't going to get that luxury in September or early October. The pen is coming in, and for the most part, I think games handle that pretty well. And you might even make the argument that the computer is doing it right and it's us humans that are doing it wrong. But managing pitching during playoff games is really tough. I left Rhodes in Game 5 of that Seattle-New York series because he was throwing lights out. And you don't pull a pitcher out of a ball game that's being successful as far as I'm concerned. Again, not telling someone who's has a 90 pitch count that he's going to throw 130 and 135 pitches. Rhodes wasn't above his pitch count till like 2 outs in the 9th of that. But look, if you can get those outs and he can be conservative with the pitch count, you don't want to burn an arm out, but you don't do that. And so what do you guys do in that situation? What's your hooks? What are your strategies for trying to, especially if you're playing cards and dice and you want a certain team to win? How do you finagle that around? Do you go through, this is what I did in some of these games, especially in the Games 4s and Games 5, is I knew I had a long reliever. You're shortening the rotation from 5 to 4, so unless the 5th starter was an absolute disaster, I would just bring in the 5th starter. Or like a Ramon Hernandez for the Yankees, I'm sorry, not Ramon Hernandez, he's the catcher for Oakland. Ramiro Mendoza, who was a Swiss Army knife for a pitcher. In those situations where your starter is going to get nuked or is in the process of getting nuked, especially with bullpen pitchers who go an inning, maybe 2, I need that long middle reliever. That was kind of a predominant strategy in baseball for so long. I can't go and burn my pen thinking that if I win this game or I need these pitchers for tomorrow, I need somebody to eat those 60, 65 pitches, whether it's in 2 innings or maybe even 4. And I think in 2 of those Game 4s, that's what I did. And I think I even intervened once for the computer. You have the extra starter in Action PC. He can go 70, 75 pitches if he hasn't been used already in the series. He's not on short rest. Action PC seems to penalize pitchers if they do go on short rest. But again, how do you train an AI to do that? And the answer is, I don't know. I honestly don't. And so, I guess in closing, what do you guys do late in the season when a team needs to win and you're using a fatigue system? Or what do you do in the postseason when you have to juggle? Because again, as we all know, you don't treat them the same as you would in a regular early or mid or even 3/4 late regular season game. And that's the difference, I think, between baseball and the other sports. You have to gamble, you have to think. Again, not saying that the decision making in the other ones are easy, but it's so different in playoff baseball. So yeah. So what would you guys do? Would you have brought in Rivera to pitch the 9th as a visitor? It's not necessarily the wrong move. It's not necessarily the right move. So let me know in the comments, what would you have done? Or what would you do in that situation with your favorite team from the favorite era that you play. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ron Jeckett. We'll talk to you the next time. So long, everybody.